They're really precious days because being a musician is sort of the core of your being, and you get together with all these other people who are musicians as well, and it's really special.
The experience of actually sitting in a big group like that and hearing the sound go on around you and just feeling that you're part of that is indescribable, really.
Attack that opening. It was founded by my dad. In January 71 was the first rehearsals. I think they had about 20 musicians. And there was a sort of a bit of doubt, teenagers, they've got the beach, will they come in and play music on a Saturday? And my dad said, yeah, and he did it, and it started to build up.
It was recommended to me by a local violin teacher, and I went and auditioned when I was 10, which was quite intimidating, it was quite scary, because I was very much the youngest there.
It was in an old library building in the bottom of Poole, and I played recorder. And to progress from the wind band to the orchestra was just such an honour. Most of them were sort of 15, 16, so I was the youngest by a long time, and I remember being sat next to Philip Cull, who played the oboe, who I just thought was a god.
So I started in the junior strings when I was about 8 years old, moved up to the Wessex Youth Orchestra when I was 11.
I went for the audition and I was a really raw rock drummer, hadn't played orchestral stuff or anything, and Don Riddell took a punt on me. I'm not sure why, but he, whatever I did, he seemed to like, and had he not taken that punt, I was destined to be an electrician.
So I started in 2012 and I left technically in 2020 in the middle of COVID, which was a shame.
I'm actually the second generation in my family in the Wessex, and my mum used to play flute in it, and then when I was about 8 years old, something like that, she was running one of the junior groups and she needed a drummer, so she dragged me in, and then it just all went from there. I did a few years in the Fanfares and then moved up to the Wessex.
We hadn't even heard of the Wessex until someone said, I really think you should join. And yes, and that's when we entered the Wessex family, and then my younger brother followed a few years later on the trombone. And I hope when my children are older and they're learning instruments that we will also return into the Wessex family with the next generation.
I, aged 4.5, 5, joined Little Starters and sat there with my 8th size violin, not really knowing what I was playing, not really having a clue what was in front of me, but I was loving the tunes, so I had a go at that. And I think Susanna was about to kill me.
Well, in 72, we were in the old library in the old town, which was then like Wuthering Heights. We were up in the Eyrie with a few cobwebs, Schubert's unfinished, Don giving the downbeat, the seed of great things with about 23 of us.
And so she moved me up to the middles and put me at the back again. And that went on for quite a few years. I joined the Wessex and was with Don for quite a number of years. Then, for some reason, I think there's just no violas around, so he kept on having me back.
you go to school Monday to Friday. Saturday was Wessex for me, and that was for 8 years. That was what I did every Saturday. And so it just became part of my life. It was what I did, and I definitely wouldn't be doing music today if I hadn't done Wessex.
Absolutely loved it. I used to live for Saturday mornings. It's the highlight of the week. Brilliant.
I think unlike most schools, where you are in your year group and you're thou shalt not speak to anyone outside, Wessex is really just ageless. So you arrive as a 4 or 5-year-old and you're in with kind of 12, 13, 14-year-olds in the starters, and then that continues, and the next generation come in behind you, and it doesn't really matter that they're a little bit younger. It is that barrier is broken down completely.
But there's people who want to kind of go into it like professionally afterwards, and then there's people who are just doing it for fun, and so that kind of dynamic is quite nice, because for the people who are doing it for fun, they kind of step up kind of a bit more, because there's the people who are really serious, and then for the people who are really serious, they kind of learn to have fun.
The music that we get to play is absolutely incredible. I don't know many other youth orchestras that would attempt Bolero or Marriage of Figaro or anything that we're doing tonight.
We had people like, Don Riddell, I think, was still leading the orchestra when I joined, and he was just a fantastic player, and it was really great to just look at these people at the front of the sections and aspire to be there one day.
I think one of my very first Wessex concerts was the 30th anniversary, and it was the first time I played the Rachmaninoff's Second Symphony, and I do remember telling my music teacher at school that I wanted to kill this person called Rachmaninoff, because I really didn't like having to transpose into the key of E, which is not great if you're a horn player, and really hurt my head. And I remember her looking at me really strange and going, "That's fine, Kate, but he's already dead, so you're going to have to pick a new victim."
It's knowing that what you're going to do, you will be proud of, and everyone has worked to do it, and so you want everyone to succeed, you want everyone to play their best, and you know everyone can.
It just feels like you're part of something really big. You can produce sounds that you can't produce by yourself, and I think that's really special.
Susanna will say, "Oh, you need to look up from your stands, look around, and see each other. If you can see movement, if you can see eye contact, you can then play with the kind of unity that pieces like this need."
In the 70s, the orchestra was gradually building. They toured 4 times. And then by 1980, they'd started going into National Festival, and they were starting to play, and they were then invited to play in the Albert Hall for the school's proms. That was the first of what has become 5 appearances at the Albert Hall for the school's proms. And the orchestra's first performance here at what was Poole Arts Centre, before it was renamed, was the first year this building opened in 1978. So this is our concert home.
It's good to have an orchestra from Germany, because it's like that music being a language that kind of transcends borders.
I'm just used to like playing with 30 people at most, and now it's just you're sitting in this huge crowd, and it's awesome but also very intimidating.
To play together and to play in such a big orchestra and such a big symphony orchestra it's very cool.
The night before the concert, what can we achieve? Well, first of all, we can remind ourselves that we can play it.
You know, Don Riddell, he was a fantastic man. He was terrifying. He really was.
Quite frightening, I would say.
He could be a marvellous mix of petrifying and inspiring at the same time.
Now, the stringendo is not gradual. We agreed that it would be a change of pace. And the worst thing of all was after the Pure Vivo, after D, we have all that sound and fire and fury, and we practiced last week going, umcha, 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 ha, ah, That's like the strongman lifting a balloon that's painted black instead of a weight. Yeah, you just charge through, and it was a great disappointment.
I was scared witless of him. In a very good, positive way, because I think he needed to shake me up a bit.
Well, I think it would be fair to say he was at times a little irascible in the ways that maestros were in those days, but he demanded of us very, very high standards, acuity, and also he had a certain irreverence about his style, which was very healthy.
Don Riddell was ambitious about the music that he chose for the orchestra, so we kind of had to up our game always.
How do you choose your repertory? I noticed, for example, you programmed Mahler's First Symphony not long ago, where there's nearly an hour of very difficult music. Yes. Isn't that a bit ambitious for a bunch of kids?
I think this is the most difficult part of being a conductor of a youth orchestra, because one has to stretch them a little, but not too far.
And I think if you were complimented, it was a bit like a Paul Hollywood handshake. It didn't happen very often, but when it did, you were made up.
One of the things that's always a challenge, particularly if you get 120 people on stage, is everybody playing at the same time. You know, when you're not professional and you're learning, you get your head in the difficult bit and you can forget about rhythm. And, you know, Don, I noticed at these points, used to start marching. And first time I saw this, I thought, that's really odd. But all of a sudden, all the kids, because we'll all recognise somebody marching, you just keep in step. And nothing ever fell apart. It was absolutely bang on together.
As a newbie at the back of the second violins, I think we all felt that he could see what everybody in the whole orchestra was doing at the same time. So there was this sort of eye that you thought was always on you, which was rather alarming. But
well, he was very charismatic. He very much knew what he wanted. It was very much his baby. He cared passionately about the music, but also was passionate about looking after the individuals and promoting the highest musical standards to make it the best it could possibly be on concert day. He didn't take any nonsense, and so he could be pretty forthright, but we all totally respected him as our sort of figurehead of the orchestra, and we would all bend over backwards to do the best we possibly could with him holding the baton.
If he told me to do something, I would do it. And I think that's a great learning curve, and helped me work with a few more fearsome conductors that I have in my life.
In the rehearsals, there's no talking, you focus, you try and get things right, you're counting, you're concentrating, you do that for whatever, hour and a half or something like that, and then you have to have a break. And it's always a big thing in youth orchestra. You go off for your 15 minutes, and you buy sweets and your drinks, and you chat together and you relax. And the thing that really surprised me then is when I was talking to Don, standing beside him in this cafe, all the kids around, and he just leaned over to the light switch, turned it off and turned it back on. And all the children just sort of stood up and started walking back to rehearsal. I said, what's going on? He said, well, the break is over, now they're returning. I'd never seen that before. And I could see then there was this sort of real sense of focus, intentionality. Yes, it was a youth orchestra, it was fun, it was enjoyable, but it was something that we had to be worked at and done and achieved, and it was fantastic.
My first year was her father's last year, and then so I sort of was there for the transition. And it's definitely quite interesting. There's sort of moments where I can sort of see Don talking when she's conducting. And in my own teaching as well, I've recently been running a youth jazz band, and I won't say the quote, but I found her voice came out of my mouth when I was talking to the kids, something she said, and it took me a second to realise, where's that come from? And then I realised.
There is something about making a good performance of a piece of music that is difficult to match anywhere else. If you like, it's a kind of an emotional high, I think is the current phrase. And at the end of a good concert, they should feel about 6 inches above the ground. And I think a lot of our young people do. They certainly seem to.
We've not been dependent on government funding or Arts Council or anything like that. So as things have ebbed and flowed and funding has come and gone, we've not been dependent on that. We've always had to support ourselves, and we've been very lucky with fabulous sponsors over the years, and volunteers and supporters and donors, and it's been recognised from really crucial corners, and they've helped and supported us. So it has enabled us to just, when there's difficulties with sort of the more sort of political climate and there's less interest in music, we've been able to just keep moving forwards. We're a community interest company, which basically means we're not for profit. Everything that we do, any funding that we bring in, is going to be used solely to support the kids and make sure that the instruments are there. I want to do everything we can to have instruments on loan for kids that can't afford to buy the instruments. Or it's so costly with music, instrument maintenance, instrumental lessons, exams, all of that stuff. And the price of an instrument, there are particular instruments that are just not being taken up because they're so costly to start. And it's things like that I want us to start to be able to help more kids to get their hands on these instruments.
Watching them step onto that stage for the first time is a real special experience, because you just see them kind of, the slight level of fear, and then the realisation that you can do it.
You'll have to get the bow right and the fingering. And if you play the violin, you have to listen if it's sharp or flat. I like playing Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. My best friend at school sits next to me because she's in orchestra too, and it feels like sometimes we giggle a bit because we might do something wrong, and then but we just laugh and keep smiling. That I sit next to my friend called Cussing. Cheekily, when we're in the rehearsal, we play fishing with our bows.
And that level of confidence that builds in anyone is huge.
To sit at the dinner table when I was a kid, and there was always a conversation about what music we're doing next, or where we're going, or what the plan was, and it was always there. I mean, if we were going on holiday, my dad had 5 admin jobs to do before we left. My mum's going, we can never go away on holiday without Wessex, all these things, and he had to drop things off before we went, and it's a member of my family.
The first rehearsal I ever did, and we were playing Those Magnificent Men and Their Flying Machines, cracking tune. There's a little snare drum solo in it, and I missed it. And Susanna stopped and said, "What's your name?" I was like, "Rob." I was like, "Are you right at the back? You've got a little solo there." And I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm fine." And played it right the second time, but yeah.
She is very good to be able to control all of us, keep us all in time, especially at the beginning of term when we're all sight reading for the first time and everything. She does very well to keep us all together.
What's interesting, I was saying to the others a bit earlier on, there are some mannerisms that are quite similar. The way she leant back on the rostrum, I remember him doing that and putting the glasses up on the thing, and a good sense of humour. So although it was very rigorous, there was quite a lot of humour and banter, and it was very high quality, but also a lot of fun.
So she always runs the Wessex as if we were professionals. We come in, sit down, do the rehearsal, no phones, no chatting, no messing around. I mean, there's obviously a little bit of messing around, obviously, but it was always run to a professional standard.
1, 2.
There's a lot of history with this orchestra, and especially to have all the alumni join us and to experience all of the different past members of the orchestra and what they can bring to it.
To be able to see all the alumni here today, what decades and generations they're from, and seeing people who may have left when I started, and they're here, and everyone's just big part of this big community.
Coming back as an alumni, you know that you're part of people who were way before you, like who were in the Wessex in the 70s, and people who have just left the Wessex a few years ago. So you're part of a much larger community. It's not just your orchestra of 100 people when I was in the orchestra, but something massive. And I think this golden anniversary brings that home to you, to know that you're part of something much bigger than what you thought you were.
You feel a sense of responsibility as a player coming back, and you're giving them this experience and allowing them to take the lead and supporting them, creating one of these most amazing performances they're ever probably going to be a part of.
All the alumni have so many different strengths and abilities, and they can bring so many different things, and just from everything from little tips to me listening in to how they're playing and they're performing, not just playing the music but how they act, how they approach the concert and the rehearsals. It teaches me a lot, and it's great actually.
I suppose my big story is that the person I met in Wessex Junior Strings is now my wife, and she's a professional violinist.
And obviously meeting my husband here at the Wessex Youth Orchestra. It's a bit twee, but yes.
We're still together 30 odd years later.
Playing in the orchestra was the reason I chose to go into music and take it up as a career. Certainly, there's no doubt about that. And I think it's probably the same for a lot of people in the orchestra. It's just, the experience of actually sitting in a big group like that and hearing this sound go on around you and just feeling that you're part of that is indescribable, really.
And also I think what is the best thing that has always come to me from Wessex, and I think it's one thing that Don always really told us, is that music and music education should be available to everyone. And it's one of the things that I certainly really believe in, and that's why I became a music teacher, really.
It was an environment which prepares you for life, and definitely, obviously, for being a professional musician in a way that nothing else around here does.
It's not about creating professional musicians of the future. That's really not what I'm trying to do. Although it does happen, it's kind of a happy product. But what we are really about is ensuring that all the kids that come through the orchestra actually learn to be professional. All those qualities, life skills, cooperation, teamwork, just turning up on time and organising their diaries and taking responsibility, taking initiative, all these things that employers are going to be interested in. And they have to learn that, being part of an orchestral team. They have to. So even though they're not going to become professional musicians in the future, music will always be with them. But all those skills, those qualities that they need for whatever it is they're going to do, they learn while they're playing music, and they have so much fun while they're doing it. It's the best way to learn.
When we played the Pomp and Circumstance, I have to say I really struggled not to cry, because my memories of that was the Albert Hall. So I would have been first oboe, and we ended that particular week. We were the last orchestra, ending the Saturday night concert with Pomp and Circumstance. And sitting there and playing that with Susanna, it just took me back to that, and Don Riddell. And I really, really struggled. And every time we play it, even we played it this morning, I get goosebumps.
I wouldn't be doing what I do today if I hadn't been in this orchestra, and I'm sure that's the same for a lot of the pro musicians who have come through it. So yeah, it's definitely a lot of affection and gratitude, really.
The things that I've, learned from my time with the Wessex, I've like I do a lot of teaching, I try and pass on those same ideas because they work, and that's how you should conduct yourself as a musician, absolutely.
And the lovely thing is the 50 years actually spans 2 generations. So one of my daughters played the viola in the youth orchestra for several years as well.
Well, a lot of the people that were in the Wessex went on to music colleges and are in the profession.
So my job, I am now the drummer at Wicked in London. Previously I was at We Will Rock You for 10 years.
Give them the experience of playing those bigger scale pieces in a giant concert hall, because that's what sets you up for the future.
The Albert Hall is their second gig these days. They're almost an ensemble in residence. So I think Carnegie Hall and the Scala and everything else is beckoning to them.
It does make me feel quite emotional, and I'm so just honoured really to be a part of it all these years later.
It was a valuable part of my upbringing, and definitely I wouldn't be the person I am today without it.
I just want them to have the same opportunities that we all had as youngsters as well. It's got to keep going because it's so good for them, just making music.